Hello, Clinton.
Hello, Nick. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. And how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah.
Really good. In good spirits.
Oh, excellent. Well, that's both of us then. That makes two of us because we just had a wonderful, energizing and encouraging conversation with Noreen Blanlouet from the Co-Production Network for Wales. I was very, very taken with what she shared there. What did you think?
Yeah, I was. My main takeaway point from the conversation was about transforming co-production culture, and she mentioned, in that conversation came up about culture equals values times behaviours, and for me, the biggest thing that key message for me that I think our listeners and should take from the conversation is only when we take out values off the page and actually live them can we say we have a strong co-production culture. That's what I would say.
Welcome everyone to our latest episode of Changing It Up. We're delighted to have with us here today Noreen from the Co-Production Network of Wales, and we're going to be exploring all things co-production. So Noreen, welcome along. It's lovely to have you.
Thank you very much. It's a delight and an honour to be with you today.
Brilliant. Oh, great. An honour. No one's ever said that before. Noreen's just told us listeners she is a subscriber to the podcast. So that's something that Clinton and I didn't even realise you could do. Let alone that there was one. So if you like what you're hearing, subscribe. How do you subscribe, Noreen, out of interest?
I think it depends on which platform you're listening in. Without plugging any brands deliberately, but I listen on Spotify, and you can follow the podcast as a whole, and then you get notifications when new episodes are posted. So that's quite handy to keep track of stuff that you like listening to. So I can speak from that experience, and other platforms probably have similar ways of following.
Brilliant. Well, there you go. Subscribe, listener. That's the way forward. So brilliant. Anyway, lovely to have you with us. We'll crack on now with our quick fire questions.
Okay.
And then our meaty questions. First quick fire question, Noreen. If you could only eat one dish or meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh, I know this one. I think about this a lot. Maybe because I'm French, I'm constantly thinking and talking about food. And I've decided that potatoes and butter is the thing that I can have every day, every meal for the rest of my life. And it's a slight cheat because actually, if you have a cooked potato and some butter, you can refry it, you can mash it, you can, do things with it that sort of changes it while it's still potatoes and butter. Yeah. And apparently, I've learned on a fact podcast that potatoes and butter give you all the essential minerals and vitamins that you need to stay healthy. So it's also nutritionally sufficient.
Fabulous. Oh, there we go. Not just an interesting answer, but an educational answer. Well, thank you very much for that.
Most definitely. Noreen, welcome. My question is, and if you could only go to one more place on holiday for the rest of your life, where would that be?
Is that one more as in an additional place I've never been to, or just one place apart from where I'm living?
Well, it's how you would like to interpret the question.
I'm over-engineering this. I'm going to choose Pembrokeshire. It's only down the road, a couple of hours by car on the train. And actually it's wild and it's beautiful and it's got the sea and it's got walks and it's got beautiful countryside and cute little towns. And it's just a nice place to slow down in and take a break in, and I never get bored of it. The landscapes in Wales are generally changing and beautiful and varied, and there's a special place in my heart for Pembrokeshire, especially the north coast.
Interesting. You've sold it to me.
Come to Wales when we can.
Most definitely.
And how do you like to pass the time, Noreen? Do you have any particular hobbies or interests?
Too many things are jostling in my head to come out at once. Lockdown has been pretty busy for us, for our organization in the past year. So not a huge amount of time, and hobbies have been a bit restricted to re-binging Netflix series and I like making craft things and kind of taking on new crafts. And at the moment I'm toying into, should I try lino cutting and, that kind of thing. But I think they come in phases. It's like, I'm just looking for displacement activity and then I'll do it for a bit and then I'll look for a different displacement activity. But I've been rewatching all of Parks and Recreation recently. I'm in season 6 at the moment and I had watched it in totally before. And it just makes me laugh so much because, especially with a co-production lens and a kind of public service lens, watching it and people's behaviors and the story patterns are just brilliant, but also it's just nice and kind and just a funny distraction. So quite boring hobbies. An interesting hobby, but which I haven't really done much of in the past year, is that I ride a motorbike.
Wow.
And I enjoy riding just as a mode of transport. It's more fun and it's slightly more environmentally friendly than a car, and it's much easier to park than a car. And so before, I'd used to take it into town for meetings and it's my general mode of transport for the close vicinity. But recently I haven't been anywhere, so it's in the garage and a bit neglected right now, but hopefully I'll get out again soon.
Smashing.
Wow, you daredevil. Okay. My question is, I suppose, builds on you referenced Netflix. So my question is, what was the last TV show you watched that you really enjoyed and why?
I'm going to go with Schitt's Creek. And I took some convincing in it because I watched the first episode when it came out and everybody was like, oh, this is amazing, everybody should watch it. So I watched the first episode and I thought, these people are obnoxious, I'm not watching this. This is not going to happen. This is not my thing. And my friends were like, no, stick with it. Just watch the second one and, give it a chance. And from the second episode, I was sold. And it is, it's the premise of the program that these people are obnoxious, but actually they go through such a journey of growth. And there's a tolerance and a kindness in everybody there. They're a strange family compared to this environment that they land in. And yet they're received with kindness. They're received with, not that, judgmentally or critically, and there's this general acceptance that people are who they are and that's okay, and that's just so uplifting and just a balm for the soul, I think.
Funny enough, Sean mentioned that one as well, didn't she, Clinton?
Yeah, and that's on my list to watch, because I've been hearing quite a lot of rave reviews about it, so I'm definitely gonna watch it now.
Yeah.
Stuff.
I watched the first episode too and then didn't get past that, so maybe I need to.
Yeah, give episode 2 a chance, and it does turn things around a little bit.
Brilliant. And slightly more highbrow question now. What was the last book you read?
Oh no, that's the one where I fall over. I generally have very little brain space left at the end of the day. And so I've been reading and rereading and rereading my collection of Terry Pratchett Discworld novels because they're easy and familiar and I can just fall asleep on them. It kind of shuts my brain down and stops me thinking about work, and then I fall asleep and it's fine because I know the story so well that it doesn't matter if I drop off in the middle of a page. So it's not very fancy and it's not new. I have a number of new books on my bookshelf waiting for a bit of brain capacity, but right now it's revisiting like a comfort blanket my Terry Pratchett collection.
Lovely.
Noreen, this question is the silver bullet of questions. The £1 million question: what would you do in 12 months with £1 million?
In 12 months? That's a lot of money to spend in not a lot of time.
Yeah.
And the clock's ticking.
Oh God, countdown.
12 months starts now.
Well, the 12 months have started. Well, that'd be the kind of what I think of standard, sort out, pay off the mortgage, pay off my mum's mortgage, pay off, families and friends, kind of, that kind of getting that security. But I think whatever's left, I would probably figure out some kind of investment so that we could draw down some interest on an ongoing basis to support the organization, to support the co-production network, actually, because we're still quite a young organization, and we're still at the stage where funding can be an issue, and actually having a regular source, even if it's not a huge amount of money, mind you, the interest on a million would be decent, but that would be enough to keep us ticking over comfortably and have that safety net of we can have a member of staff in post to look after things and keep things running nicely and keep the wheels oiled. So I think that would be a bit of an investment towards the long term. A bit of a cheat, I know, because that's not really spending it in 12 months. I could invest it in 12 months.
Yeah, it's spent, isn't it? Money's gone out the bank.
There we are.
Great answer. Thank you very much. And well done for surviving the quickfire questions.
Thank you.
We can now proceed to stage 2, the slightly more meaty questions. Fast. Yes. Thank you very much for that, Noreen. That was great. So the first question is around your work. Could you tell us a little bit about that, and also why you're passionate about co-production and why you think it's an important approach?
I came to co-production through tangents of tangents. I haven't got a public sector or a third sector background. So when I encountered co-production, it was new to me. And it was through a research project I was assisting on. It was collecting case studies and examples of practice. And it blew my mind how transformative it can be and how great an impact it can make on people's lives just through, it sounds simple, I know it's hard in practice, but just through listening and really valuing people's wisdom and experience and input and having these constructive conversations and acting on them. So the principles are so straightforward and heart-centered and really human, but it really changes lives and communities and, in services and efficiencies and all the rest, all the things that fall out of it. So before that, part of my background has been working as a coach and a personal and professional coach. And for me, that embodies a similar approach that people know they have that inherent wisdom and they know what they need or what they want. They don't always know that they know. And so our role is to facilitate that emergence and enabling people to find their answers for them to be owned and sustainable. And so for me, philosophically, it was completely in line with my belief systems. So that's how I initially got involved in co-production. The research project turned into putting on some events to share what we found, turned into campaigning and writing a letter to the First Minister in Wales and asking him to do co-production in public services as a way of doing things in Wales. That was back in 2013. And the idea was gaining traction, and myself and my partner, we were kept talking to everybody about it, and we kept getting asked to be in kind of committee meetings and drafting bills and acts, and just we kept sticking our oar in everywhere going, remember the citizens, what about the citizens' voice? So, that was starting to snowball. So this is where we applied for funding from Big Lottery at the time, now the National Lottery Community Fund, got funded for 3 years to set up and become a proper organization in our own right, rather than 2 women on the corner of a kitchen table. And this is where the co-production network came from, and I've been heading it up and steering it as the director for the past 4 years. And it's turned into, so we're now a social enterprise, a not-for-profit organization. We're independent, we're not government funded. Our primary purpose is to support a community of practice of people who are interested in co-production and these approaches, and co-production adjacent approaches as well, across Wales, slightly wider afield as well, but most of our members are in Wales. And we use that collective voice to influence policy, to talk to government, to talk to the civil service about the space that we're creating for co-production within our public services and organizations. And we also support that with training and consultancy and hands-on support for people who are actually looking to improve their work.
You mentioned some of the values that you believe should be in co-production. So as a concept, co-production suggests equity and inclusion. But however, in my dealings and in co-production, it's used from the public sector varies. So why do you think co-production is important?
I think it's important first from a moral and ethical standpoint. We've got public services that have developed into a pattern that's quite disempowering to people, that to get help you have to keep coming back with more problems, and that people who come and access services are little black holes of need, and the professionals are the ones who have the solutions and the resources, and it's a very one-way relationship where that's just not helping. That's not helping on a mental, emotional, or psychological level. So there is that to start with, humanistic reasoning for it. There is also the harsh reality that we've had more than 10 years of austerity. We've had the impact of COVID, which we're still figuring out how much and how drastic it's going to be. Public services just don't have the resources to meet people's needs in the way they might have done or they were intended to when they were set up sort of 70, 80 years ago at the start of the welfare state. And so from a financial and economic standpoint, it's just not possible to meet needs with the resources available in the way that things have been, things are working. So we do need to work smarter as public services and not waste, not duplicate, actually leverage the resources and wisdom that are just so undervalued with our communities and our service users, and actually work a lot smarter, do better. And that's possible if we start by listening rather than and coming with answers rather than coming with questions. Freudian slip, coming with questions rather than coming with answers and solutions, and actually making wiser decisions because we're drawing on a broader pool of wisdom. An additional factor, I think, is that in the past, 10-ish years, as consumers, as citizens who are also consumers, we're used to interacting with private organizations and commercial organizations on our phones, and 5-star reviews and feedback on Amazon, and being able to tweet the courier if the parcel's been kicked over the fence, and all that kind of stuff, and we expect a response. And there's an expectation that's developed of responsiveness because of digital channels that carries across to public services in general, and saying, well, why aren't you talking to us? Something's going wrong, solve it. We want you to listen. So I think the context of the expectations has changed as well, which contributes to this need.
I really like the way you explain that. That's a really helpful way to understand it. So in terms of that then, what are the things do you think are enabling co-production to happen? And conversely, what's getting in the way of it? What's blocking it?
I forgot one of the drivers, but actually it's probably one of the enablers as well, is that particularly because I work in Wales, we've got legislation that's asking public bodies to do co-production and involve people in these processes. And I know there are equivalent pieces of legislation in England and Scotland as well that put people's voice at the centre of the delivery, at least for some aspects. So that's definitely one of the drivers and enablers. Legislative compliance is not to be neglected in the direction that organizations take and how their strategic frameworks develop. It's definitely a big nudge. But that being said, something that you'll just hear very often over here in Wales is that, yes, we've got great legislation and it's setting a fantastic vision in direction of travel, but there's still a gap in implementation. It's slow to catch up. And I think one of the reasons why, and I'm not sure if it's a barrier, but it's certainly a reason why things are slow, is that co-production really is a value space. It's a way of working. It's a way of showing up. It's not just a process that we can go, right, this is your new process or checklist, and you can roll it out Monday, but actually saying you've got to change the behaviors and the culture within the organization to shift into putting people at the center. And that's got huge implications for us as public service professionals. How do we show up? What does it mean for us? How do we relate to people in a different way? There's a lot of soul searching that happens that I don't think we talk about enough. The internal work enables, the external work and the change in the organization, but also the systems need to follow. All our systems are geared towards hierarchical command and control, centralized decision-making, levels of permission. And we need to break those down in order to make the decisions as close to the front line, as close to the action as possible, with the right people at the right time. And so systems need to shift in response to that. And I think that's where the slowness is coming. I guess in a nutshell, the barrier would be the speed of change of systems to adapt to the new needs of working this way.
That's very interesting. Do you think sometimes by implementing the more process side of it, that can then drive that system change, or does that have to come first, do you think, or both at the same time?
I think they come hand in hand, definitely. There's a risk that if people are very attached to the process and trying to get things done, that they kind of lose or they forget what the value is behind it. And it can be tokenistic. And Clinton was saying earlier, lots of people talk about about co-production in public services, and it doesn't always mean the same thing or with maybe the same rigor as, that real integral value work. And that's what happens sometimes. Our first minister said sometimes it gets sprayed on like a deodorant word. And it's like, oh, if we make sure we've got one service user at the table, tech, we've done co-production. And it's just not. So having the actions and the behaviors that we can track is useful, but it's not the end in itself. We need to make sure that there's an understanding of what comes, what underpins it. And I guess that's the driver of the system change is the understanding of why that's needed and what it looks like. There's, on the whole, from conversations I've been having, I tend to think that at executive and senior levels in organizations, there is a certain amount of buy-in to co-production, either because legislation says your organization has to co-produce with its service users and citizens, or because people genuinely see the value and the impact they can have. And then on the front line, more often than not, we talk to people who support people every day and who just like, oh, thank God, yes, just take the admin and the systems, get them out of my way so I can make the right decisions with people. It's a very human and common sense way of working. But there's a whole layer of people who are managing the systems in between the senior leadership and the frontline practitioners. And I have a lot of empathy for them because they need to keep things moving and delivering on a daily basis. And we're telling them that they need to work in a completely different way, but also that we can't tell them what the new way looks like because by definition, co-production is we create it as we go. So we can't give them the picture of where they should be heading to. But at the same time, they have to keep delivering because otherwise people's lives might be at risk, or things are really, there's a real impact on the people that they support. So they're in this impossible situation where they're trying to change the wheel on the car while they're trying to drive it. And it's just really hard to be in that position. And that's where a lot of our support happens, is helping people think through how they can adjust bit by bit while not failing in, the current delivery, but adapting it and learning as they're going and taking that innovation approach, which is a bigger mindset change for organizations.
My question leads on from what you've been saying, because I'm really interested how we can use co-production to transform a culture. And you mentioned you touched on value-based. And for me, there's culture equals values times behaviours. And for me, I would be really interested to try and understand, we've had, through the pandemic, massive fault lines around inequalities. And the further you are away as an individual or communities, the further marginalised you are from decision making. What is the future for co-production? As we move out of the pandemic, what is the intentional actions that is needed to close the inequality gap for people and communities?
I think the first step is either relying on or developing new alliances. I talk to a lot of people in statutory organizations and civil service who know they need to co-produce with a whole different range of audiences and different kinds of people from the general population, and who just don't know where to begin to find them to have conversations in a supportive way. And so the first learning is use the networks you've already got. There's a lot of third sector organizations and community groups who are in touch with the people that you're trying to reach. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so we need to collaborate better between organizations to be supporting and reaching the people that we want to talk to. It's about understanding what people need to be involved in a fair and accessible way, because not everybody's got the same comfort levels, even the same accessibility needs, or just the same desire to be involved. And so we can't just provide one channel and one opportunity to have a conversation with an organization and go, oh, well, nobody took up the opportunity, so it must be they're not interested. No, it means that we haven't got the right way to be interesting to them and to get in front of people in a way that's open and inviting. So we've got to use all the channels that are at our disposal and really understand what people need and when and how they want to get involved. And part of that is actually, before we have the conversation about co-producing whatever it is that we're trying to co-produce, well, let's co-produce this engagement and ask what people need to come to the table. Do they want to? What would make it easier? How can we support? And build that relationship before we start asking the questions. My third element to that is thinking of it as an ongoing relationship. And the advice I often say to people is, don't be the annoying friend who only gets in touch when they want something. You've got to keep the conversation and the relationship going in between. Otherwise, why should people keep giving and giving and giving when actually they're not getting anything in return? So that reciprocity has to be there. They're telling people what you've done with the information they've shared, what's changed, what is happening, and let people get something out of it as much as you get something out of it as an organization, so that it's a fair relationship there. And that would look different for everybody. So every case needs to be co-produced in a way in itself as well.
I've said about co-production before, for me, that if you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu. So, for me, co-production is really important, and that has to be acknowledged, because most, like I talked about, the inequalities element, and for people and communities who are the furthest away will have less power. Mm-hmm. In the decision making. So for me, co-production has to balance the process for access and outcomes for people and communities.
In terms of the practice I've been seeing in Wales, there are people who've been doing co-production for a long time, usually community-based organizations or some housing associations who really, really get the values of co-production, and who just, it just pervades kind of every fiber of their being as an organization. So it nearly becomes nearly something that's not noticeable, because it's just woven through everyday activities. So they rarely, if ever, talk about co-production as a word. They don't ever need to use the term, because it's not about talking about it, it's about, how they work. And, residents are part of the decisions, people are part of the shaping the process. There's a fantastic organization in West Cardiff called ACE, ACE. It's the acronym stands for Action in Caira and Ely. Caira and Ely are two neighborhoods in West Cardiff. People come with ideas, people from the community come with ideas and go, well, there's a need for this, or can we do that? And they've been going for many years now, probably nearly 10 years, I think. And so they're at the stage where, because they've woven that through from the beginning, while at the start there were community support workers and people who were providing the momentum, it's really shifted into something that community owns as a collective. I think for the people who are closest to the communities, who have that approach, that values base, it's common sense. It's just, we grow people, we grow with them, we all grow together, we learn how to do this stuff together. For organizations that feel a bit more remote, trying to do meaningful engagement, the journey is longer. And often where they start is just trying to understand what good engagement looks like. It's quite far away from co-production, but it's the necessary stepping stones. Initially is making sure we talk to everybody. Who are the seldom heard voices? Who are the people who never come to our consultations? That actually, if we decide to run things differently and go and have conversations in a different way, that maybe we can hear from people that we don't hear about before. It's only a tiny thing, but that's the first step for them in terms of moving towards something that's more inclusive and more diverse.
The biggest take home for me, listening to you reflect there, is that this is about how you get to the co-productive mindset and organizational culture and behavior, rather than the process in itself, but also by implementing the process. That's also part of that journey too. How do you then sustain that? And I think that's the important thing. And I suppose leadership has a big part to play in all of that. And
huge. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's got to be a constant steer, constant reminder that this is what we're working to, and also constant permission, you know, deliberately making it really explicit that we're saying to people, it's okay to make mistakes.
Doreen, what I'll take away from this is co-production has 3 levels, but one of the easiest level is at the individual one-to-one the co-production.
Yeah.
Then you have at the operational level for an organizational institution. Then for me, it's strategic level.
Yep.
Which is the hardest level, I believe, and trying to get that balance right. But that's the area where structural inequality lies and systematic. So, what's your, thoughts on the structural element of inequality?
I think the structural element of inequality comes because the structures, the systems have been designed with the systems in mind, not the people. And we have a machine that feeds itself and makes decisions that works for the machine, not for the people it's supposed to be serving. And so in terms of the system change and mindset change that that go hand in hand and that we're trying to bring in, it's about saying let's forget for a minute about what the system needs. That's less important. But who are the people we're supposed to be serving, as public servants? Service, who are we serving? And I think we lose track of that because organizations, structures, systems, we've inherited them, haven't we? And they're broken and they're not actually serving people anymore. The machines are feeding themselves. If we could sort of break them apart and start again and set them up with different, set up a completely new system and structure and co-produce that, we would have a very, very different picture, because it would be about what do we need the organization to be to enable us all to live the best life that we can, to meet our needs, to enable us to be human and people and have, recognize our achievements and our value. At the moment, the system is recognizing the value of the system, not of people. And we're trying to shift to, maybe system isn't the right word anymore, but to a way of being where we recognize the value of people more than the value of the structure. It takes time, it takes focus, it takes a commitment of focus on it. And people would like a silver bullet because everything feels so broken and drastic and urgent, but this is the opposite of a silver bullet. It's something that needs to grow organically. This is a plant, not a little piece of metal. And so we need to allow that to happen as well. We need to accept that at least we can make a start and then it will go where it needs to go. But that commitment of focus and going, we're going to nurture this and allow it to grow is important.